Hey guys, how are you? This is Ishai Bresler, your host of the CRE Shark Eye Show. Hope you guys are doing fantastic. Today we have Suja Shyam. She's the managing principal of Luxe Capital Investment Group, and they deal with so many asset classes, funds of funds, which is a topic that we haven't spoken about yet, and I'm so excited about this whole topic. Not only that, but she's also dealing with, she has an experience with Airbnb, which you're going to hear so much about it today. Suja, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Ishai, for being here. And it's really great to get to talk to your listeners today.
Thank you. I'll tell you what, before we dwell into this whole thing, which I'm so excited about, give us the 2-minute elevator pitch of what you guys really do.
Absolutely. So I'm the managing principal of Luxe Capital Investment Group. And at Luxe Capital, our goal is to serve our investors. So we raise capital from investors and we place that capital. And so our goal is to provide our investors with a diverse offering of investment opportunities across asset classes, geographies, and sponsors. So we really see ourselves as vetting deals in many different asset classes and many different operators and really finding the best deals so that you or whoever is interested in investing don't have to do that work on their own. Like you don't have to, if I was a sponsor, then I would, pretty much, not that I wouldn't recommend other sponsors to you, but the only deals I would be bringing to you on a regular basis were my own. So my goal is to help people create a diverse set of offerings in the private placement world. And we focus specifically on recession-resistant asset classes.
Which is extremely exciting because that requires an expertise of vetting different type of things, especially the sponsors. We're going to really dwell into that. But you know what? Let's go back a little bit. Let's take the time machine and the DeLorean and ride all the way back and ask you, how'd you get into this whole thing?
Absolutely. Yes. Great question. So I figured out that I was interested in real estate while I was doing my MBA. And I basically had done some work in community development. And I really decided that I was also interested in business. And so I felt like real estate was at a wonderful intersection of community development, urban design, and actually business. So I loved the idea of getting into real estate, but then the question is, how do I get into real estate? Because it's a very diverse field, right? And so I ended up actually starting out as an underwriter of multifamily affordable apartment buildings. And the reason I started out there was because I was told that it was really good real estate training to be an underwriter. So that's what I did at first. It turns out that I did not have entrepreneurial mentors in that space because I was essentially working for financial institutions, in other words, banks. And so I was working for banks, and pretty much everybody in the bank was mostly interested in continuing to work for financial institutions rather than being an entrepreneur and building their own portfolio. So I didn't really find the mentors that I needed. And long story short, there's a whole story about how I ended up leaving that corporate world and taking 18 months to travel around the world. And then I decided I, needed to revisit becoming an entrepreneur.
You know what? Let's pause for a second. This is a cool story. Tell us about that. How did that come about? You left this thing, and I'll tell you something. I also worked for a financial institution. I was the only guy who was not an accountant. And I know exactly what you're talking about. And I wanted to do deals and I wanted to go forward. And they were interested in giving service, great service. But the one thing that is great about those institutions is that it's a great school for finance, knowing the numbers, crunching the numbers, understand underwritings, understand what the banks need, understand what everybody needs, all the players. So that's a great school. But you left it and you just said you went to travel the world. That's a cool story. Tell us about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I wouldn't have normally been able to leave the comfort of that job because it was, in many respects, a cushy job, although it was demanding and stressful. So, but it was very cushy as well. And, it was also, there was a ceiling on it. But in any case, what happened was I had a series of events that happened within 10 days that kind of pulled the rug out from under me in my whole life. So our company went through a merger, which was positive, except that after a year, it kind of fell apart. And that would have had to move across the country to stay with the company. So it was essentially like a failed merger.
And you are where?
What's that?
And you are based in?
I'm based in Portland, Oregon. And so the company that bought us was mostly like based on the East Coast. And there was basically a disagreement, or, essentially my bosses just they weren't really like interested in working for that company. So they left. And then when they left, then the new parent company just decided to close our office. So I would have had to move to stay with the company. Didn't want to do that. And I also was in a relationship that ended, and I was also in an accident, and all of those things happened within 10 days.
Wow.
And it was probably the most biggest shakeup in my life that I've ever had. And I actually am so grateful for that time, because it was incredibly difficult. It was like literally everything that I spent my time on, which was, my relationship, my job, and my activities, which were all mostly physical, like dance and acrobatics and things of that nature. So I really had nothing to do. It was just me alone in my house. Well, I wasn't totally alone. I had roommates, but I had cats, and I just didn't have anything to do. Like whatever I was so busy before, and then all of a sudden I had nothing. So it was the best invitation, though. That's what I ended up calling it, was an invitation from the universe to actually change my life, and it was just like it was like a blank slate. Like I literally had a blank slate. So I thankfully had some good friends, because I had other opportunities in that underwriting field. Like I was already having offers, and I was still kind of talking to people in the field. I could have taken another underwriting job. But deep down, I knew that I didn't really want to be an underwriter. Still, the golden handcuffs, they're very alluring, and that security of having a large check come in every 2 weeks is hard to leave. So I'm very grateful to my friends, because my friends, I told them I was going to travel for a month, maybe 2, before starting another job. And then I had a friend tell me, just think about 100 days. And I tell you, Ishai, as soon as she said that, it was like my mind was freed, because there's no way I could have put off starting that new job for 3 months like that.
What do you mean about 100 days? 100 days of?
She was thinking about, just think about traveling for 100 days. Because I had said, I'll be gone for a month, or something like that. Like I'm going to take a month off. And then she said, just think about 100 days, like a trip, like going and leaving on an international journey for 100 days.
That's amazing. And you know what? Let me ask you this. This is something a lot of people dream about, but not a lot of people can do it for many aspects. Family issues, I don't know what, traveling from, country to country or whatever it is, and financial, of course. Not a lot of people can afford, let alone meaning pay for all those trips, obviously, to have to be able to live, because you don't have that income anymore. So how did you manage to do all that and to be able to actually execute with that beautiful idea?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there are a lot of reasons why I was able to do it. So first of all, I didn't have children at the time, so I didn't have to really plan for that. Although I did check out a lot of books from the library, and there definitely are families that do it. So the key is you have to get smart with your money. And I was already house hacking at the time. So when I bought my single family house, I knew that I didn't want, like my dad had always told me that a house is a liability before it's an asset. And so I knew that I didn't want to buy a house that was too much, where the mortgage payment was going to be too high. And not only that, at first I had roommates when I purchased my house, and I was able to actually have my house cash flowing as soon as I bought it. And so all I did when I left to travel, as far as my mortgage, was I simply rented out my room and moved my things down to the basement. And it was really pretty easy. And the house was still cash flowing. On top of that, because I had purchased the house about a year prior and I didn't have any mortgage payments and I had a high paying finance job, I was saving that whole year. I mean, yes, I was spending some money on house projects and this and that, but I had quite a bit of money just saved. and I hadn't really learned how to invest yet. And so, yes, I was putting lots of money away in my 401k, but I just had quite a bit of savings. So that was number one. The number,
Beautiful.
yeah, definitely. So I was easy to leave my, house behind. And I didn't know I was going to be gone for 18 months. I was like, I'll be gone from 7 to 24 months. That's what I told myself.
Where'd you go? Where'd you go? What'd you do? Where'd you go?
Yeah, totally. Well, before I talk about that, I just want to say, the way to travel is to be very, you can do low cost travel if you take the right strategy. So there's different and I didn't do this the whole time, but I took the approach of living in communities, doing work trade. So there's, the original one was WWOOFing, Willing Workers on Organic Farm. Now there's other ones like HelpX and Workaway. And, if you mix those in like a week or even 2-week long stay in between, whatever other travels you want to do. I also did couch surfing back then. And it was a really wonderful way to not only meet people, because sometimes when you're just staying in hostels, you're only meeting other travelers. But when you do workaways and when you're doing couch surfing, you can actually live with people who are local. And so it's a wonderful way to experience travel. And I didn't start out that way. So, okay, I started out doing more touristy stuff. The thing is that actually starts to get old. It all starts to feel the same. Even if you're across the world, doing a guided tour in Thailand it ends up feeling the same as doing a guided tour in Argentina, because you're with these international people and, I don't know. I mean, it can still be fun, but it just, after a while, it might be hard to imagine. It all starts to feel the same. So where did I go? I started out in South America, and the first bit of my travel, I wasn't being quite as, I would say frugal with my cash. So I was doing a lot of touristy stuff. I was visiting friends and I was flying around a lot. So I flew to Argentina and Chile, Bolivia, El Salvador, Nicaragua. I went to Thailand, Cambodia,
Wow.
Myanmar. I actually went to Israel.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I had an amazing time in Israel, Portugal, Iceland, and then I went back to the United
Which
States.
year was that, by the way?
2014. I was in Israel.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And then so that I kind of burned through quite a bit of cash doing that. And so then I decided, okay, well, I'm not ready. I don't know what I want to do next. And so I decided I have to figure out, something else. So I'm going to start to do this slow travel thing where I'm doing more workaways and more, and I ended up going back to Argentina and just staying there for the whole time. And that was wonderful because, this whole slow travel thing is totally different than just like kind of, moving from place to place, which is fun too. There's nothing wrong with that.
Tell me something. What's your takeaway from all this traveling? Meaning you coming back today, obviously you have a lot of thoughts about it, but at that time, at that point where you finished all the back and forth, you came back, what was your takeaway then? What did you learn from it?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, because the reason that I came back is actually also kind of important, right? Like when I was traveling, I'll just back up to that. What was my main takeaway? My main takeaway when I was traveling was I was just so grateful to not have to be beholden to a 9 to 5, 8 to 6 plus weekends job. You know what I mean?
Freedom.
Like, yes. I was just like so grateful to not have to be stuck in a cubicle. I was grateful to be able to follow my every whim. I was grateful to be able to meet people from around the world. I was grateful to not have, I was just like, for me, the grind just really didn't work. Like the work, the 9 to 5. I know there's lots of people it works well for. Once you have children, it's really nice to have that steady paycheck. And so nothing to knock it, but for me, it was just sucking my soul dry, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. It's just like, I was just like, I did not want to go to the same office for the next 30 years. And I know that people move jobs and whatnot, but when I looked at my superiors, as wonderful of people as they were, it just wasn't the life that I wanted to live. I was like, I don't want to stay at this company for 15 years. I don't want to stay in this industry. It's not inspiring to me. I'm more of a deal maker, entrepreneur. And I needed to figure that out. So I was just so grateful to not have to be in a grind. And then what happened though was I was starting to kind of run low on my money, and I hadn't really figured out how to make ends meet while traveling. I know there are people who are like doing something while traveling, like digital nomads and whatnot. And I was starting to figure that out. But then I had a reckoning moment. And basically, my sister brought that to me. I didn't really realize it at the time, but basically, I told her that I wasn't going to be able to make it to her medical school graduation. And apparently, this was pretty upsetting to her because she stopped communicating with me for a period of time. And, so that really caused me to think hard about what it was that I was doing. I basically didn't want to fly back to the United States because that would cost like, a few $1,000s all said and done. And I just didn't want to spend the money because I was like, I felt like it was either my happiness or going back for her graduation. And so I had to ask myself, Ishai, well, what do I really want? Like on one hand, I think it's reasonable for me to be expected to go back to this graduation. But on the other hand, like I do not want to go back to that life I had where I was like, I just didn't want that. So actually from a hostel in Argentina, I just had this like light bulb moment, and the words passive income popped into my mind. And so I Googled passive income from a hostel in Argentina. And I realized that there are all these people who were building passive income. Interestingly enough, I didn't immediately find the real estate people, even though I already had been house hacking and I was an underwriter of multifamily assets. I didn't really see how that was going to grow quickly. And so, and I also I had some limiting beliefs, right? Like, we talk in entrepreneurship about limiting beliefs. And so, but anyways, point is I found passive income, and I found all these entrepreneurs developing passive income, not in real estate. And I was like, that's what I need. I need passive income. And so that kind of set me on this path. Like it was like immediately I was like, oh, I need to do this. And became my mission was to figure out how I could have passive income so that I wouldn't have to go to a job every day. And again, there's nothing wrong with the companies that I worked for or my coworkers. Like they were wonderful people and the companies were good companies and I had a great job. And, I'm really grateful for those experiences, but it just wasn't what I wanted for the rest of my life. So, yes, my big takeaway when I came back was that the last thing I want to do is go back to a job. There was like one job that I considered going back to, which was being a development associate. But, I didn't quite, once I found this passive income thing, I decided I was going to pursue that.
Tell you something. This is an exciting story and this is a great lesson. Look at you. You're an underwriter, a person who understands NOI, who understands cap rates, who understands the pro forma, ins and outs, debt service, that every line that you had to actually look at. And you understood things that people who are trying to understand and learn. And yet you were not with that passive income perspective. It just shows us that you need both. You need the know-how and you need the psyche. You need to know that the entrepreneurial trait of it. And you know what? It's an amazing thing because you worked for a financial institution that takes care of services. If you would have worked, I believe that strongly because I had people who worked for me. And everyone who works in an entrepreneurial company, is either a real estate developer or an operator or a private equity firm, they are educated immediately, even though they came from a finance institution, that they have to actually, right now take care of the company and make sure that the company has actual, profit from the passive income that we call, from that they have positive NOI and all that stuff. So that's an amazing thing. I never thought about it that way, but this is an incredible thing. Thank you so much for that. Tell me something. Okay, you went and you figured that out. And then all of a sudden came this whole idea of Airbnb, right? It
wasn't all of a sudden.
Okay.
Yes, it was, like I said, I had limiting beliefs about real estate. So instead, I did some entrepreneurship trainings and whatnot. I decided I was going to be a digital marketing consultant. And that's an amazing field, right? And it was a growing field. It's still a very, it's still a thriving field. Every business needs to understand it. But basically, it wasn't for me, right? Like, but I had to kind of go through some hard lessons. Like, I was still spending too much time behind a computer, and that's just not what I wanted, right? Like, was traveling the world for 18 months. I didn't want to be spending so much time behind a computer. I just wasn't into it. And so, but during that time, I was living back in my house, and I had actually had a tenant move out. And there's a couple lessons here. So the first thing is, when I was left to go travel, my house was a 5-bedroom house, and I had 4 roommates. And it was just like too many people living in the house. And that was one reason I didn't want to come back too, is I just didn't know how to deal with this like asset that I had. Like, it was cash flowing, but it wasn't really where I wanted to live. So then when I came back, actually my manager had rented out the basement unit to a woman who just wanted to stay downstairs and never wanted to use the upstairs. She wanted her own apartment, and it didn't have a kitchen or kitchenette, but she used the bathroom sink. She was a chef at a great restaurant, so she didn't really need to eat. She didn't really want to cook at home. And so she was just like living downstairs with a hot plate. And it just dawned on me. I'm like, oh, there's like an apartment in my house. So I don't actually have to rent out my whole house and everybody share the kitchen and the living room, etc. It's an apartment. It's a self-contained apartment. And so then one day she moved. So that was the first light bulb moment, that like I didn't actually have to just share the whole house with roommates. Then the second light bulb moment was when she moved out. I didn't actually want to find another basement tenant, because I feel like in Portland, it's kind of dark a lot of times in the year, and we didn't have it was a little bit dark down there. It's not as much now because we added more windows and whatnot. But I just didn't want to find another basement tenant, because I just felt like I was like basement dwellers in Portland. Like, I don't know. I didn't want to do it. So what I did was well, yeah, I mean, it was just more of a vibe thing, right? Like, it was more like the vibe was I just wanted a different vibe. So what I did was I threw it on Airbnb, and I literally just put an air mattress down there and like some random furniture that was just like nothing nice. But immediately it was renting out for 3 times more than I was getting as a long-term rental. And to me at that time, like, you got to think, like, I was living on $10 a day, like, while I was traveling, and I was living extremely frugally. And so all of a sudden I'm getting 3 times the amount of rent. Like, that was like real money to me back then. And it was just like this light bulb moment that, like, oh my gosh, like with Airbnb, I can make so much more money. And then the person also doesn't necessarily live there and like park there and have all their stuff there. And it was a side hustle for me though at the time. It was just a stopgap measure for me to build my digital marketing career. But over time, I realized that like Airbnb was steady cash flow. It wasn't like feast or famine, like consulting. And it was also, I could make it better. Like, Airbnb does a great job of teaching you to be a good host with the reviews and this and that. And so like I slowly was incentivized to become a really good, 5-star host. And so I would improve the place slowly, like literally little by little, I made it nicer. And then it was just so great that I wanted another one. So I was like brainstorming, how do I get another Airbnb unit? And what I realized is that my house, like, I had a master bedroom. I'm like, oh, people could live and rent out the master bedroom, and I could move to a different room. And so, my partner helped me. He's a general contractor, so he helped me add bathrooms and kitchenettes. And so essentially then the next iteration was that the guests entered the master bedroom through the back doors, and they had their own bathroom and their own kitchenette. And so then I had a 3-bedroom house. And so then I was only sharing the house with 2 other people, which was really, really nice. And now it's just me and my partner in the 3-bedroom house. And then at the same time, I was like, I want another one. And so I was also converting the garage to a cottage. And so now, and I mean, you'd be surprised. It's like really quiet, and we all have, there's a backyard, there's a front yard, there's side yards, and we really don't get in each other's way. And so now I literally have 3 rentable spaces on my single family property, and it cash flows really, really well. So in terms of like actually building cash flow, Airbnb it's just very fast.
It's an incredible story. Incredible story. And that leads us obviously to what you do today. If you could, take us through the whole private equity concept, which, a lot of people are familiar with.
Absolutely.
How'd you get to that point?
For sure. So, after I had developed my single family property, I still wanted some more Airbnbs. It was like 2018 and the economy was still bumping. And so I decided, I ended up finding a fourplex, and that was, it was in a commercial zone, so I could convert it to a hotel. And so that was my next project. And between the 3 units and the hotel, I then was replacing my corporate income. And so that was awesome. It was like an amazing accomplishment to replace my corporate income within 3 years. And then at the same time, I was like, okay, I know that hospitality is not a recession resistant asset class. I need to be diversifying because literally all my money comes from Airbnb and other short-term rental platforms right now. So I knew that I needed to diversify. So I was looking for the next step in real estate. And, I was listening to the Bigger Pockets and all these, different things. And I realized that I didn't want to do, whole family, single family rentals. Like I wanted to do the next level thing. Like I knew that I was a multifamily underwriter. There's people who are doing this stuff. I need to figure out how to do that. But it took a while to figure out who exactly to follow. And so I eventually found Hunter Thompson's Cash Flow Connections podcast. Somebody recommended it to me at an event that I went to. And I was just like, okay, this is the philosophy that makes sense to me. It's a very strong focus on downside protection. He was also, a very strong focus on recession resistant asset classes, a very strong focus on due diligence. His content was very high level. And it was like, I felt, like this is what I was looking for. I was looking for this type of approach to real estate investing. I wasn't looking for the shiny, oh, you're going to make so much money on your investment or whatever. Like I wanted a lot of rigorous analysis and very thoughtful, due diligence, because that's the background that I come from. I come from bank. Due diligence process takes several months, so that's how I decided. I eventually kind of found my way to that space and decided, okay, well, it's a lot of work to do. It's like basically several different business lines operating, being a syndicator. You've got to do acquisitions, which means you've got to have really good relationships with brokers. You've got to, make sure you're executing the business plan, which means you've got to have all these relationships with contractors and your property management and asset management. And then you've got to have your capital stack all lined up. So you have to have like enough people or guarantors or whatever to like get your capital stack together. And also you have to have the investors. And then you got to dispose of the asset and, do it all over again. And I had tried to have a business partner at one point, and we just ended up having very different visions. And so it didn't work out. And so I was like very hesitant to bring on another business partner. And so I decided, well, I don't want to do all 6 jobs at once. Like the whole point of me doing this is to not have a job, So, so I was like, how do I do this, but just have one job? And so I decided to focus on the vetting of deals and the capital raising because, I figured that if I build an investor base, it's just going to be valuable no matter what. Number 2, I have a strong focus already on vetting deals. And I already know how to do due diligence. And
you have the background, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I have the background. And so I decided I would focus on raising capital and vetting deals because I also wanted to put my money into, I was doing this work anyways because I wanted to invest the profits from my Airbnb business into passive investments. And so that's how I ended up in doing this. And now I've become very passionate about closing the investing gap because there's actually, a lot of people hear about the wage gap, and that is very important. We need to close that. But more important than that, in my opinion, is that we need to close the investing gap because the investing gap compounds the wage gap even more. Like if we still had the wage gap, but we didn't have the investing gap, then the gap between, women and men, people of color, white people would be less than if it was. So I really think it's so important to help people learn how to put their money to work and how to create a diversified portfolio. I'm just very passionate about it. So that's kind of what it's evolved into.
It's beautiful. Something, getting into this whole aspect, and we spoke about this before we started this interview. I want to understand, because you wanted to go for the concept of fund of funds, meaning private equity could definitely be a deal per deal type of a thing. right? And you're a fund of funds. Explain for those who don't really understand what it is. If you could please elaborate on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, one of my main concerns was making sure that when I was doing this, that we were doing it legally. And so there were a lot of different things happening when I got into the space, and I settled on the fund of funds model to be able to do this in a very clear cut and way. And so basically what we do is we gather investor capital, and then we put it into a special purpose vehicle. And then that special purpose vehicle invests in a particular deal or a particular portfolio. And so
what we call SPV. Yeah.
Yes. And so sometimes when we're writing a large check, like, 500, a million, 2 million, et cetera, or more, we can negotiate with the sponsor to get preferential treatment. And so that's one way that we get compensated, is we basically take the difference between what we're given because we're writing a large check. And, because for the sponsor, it's nice to not have to have so many, like to get a large check instead of get 10 small checks. So,
I'm sorry, I'm stopping you, but you know what? The difference is, it sounds to me more like a classic LP. Correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds to me like classic LP basically finds sponsors, vet the sponsors, vet their deals, and then go and joins them as an LP, which SPV is usually called, when we go into the startup nation type of investment, less the real estate. Real estate call it LPs. But the funds of funds, from what I understand, and tell me if this is also a strategy of yours, is to actually invest in funds, in private equity funds, that they go and vet, sponsors. Meaning, let's say you have a guy who does only certain type of private equity investments with multifamily, certain type, certain asset class, certain location, et cetera. And then you have a guy who does retail, whatever. And then you invest with that person and with that person, with that person, and they are not sponsors. Is that a part of your strategy or no? Or you invest straight with the sponsors?
So currently we're investing directly with the sponsors rather than in funds. Although, people use the word fund and they kind of toss it around. And
that's true.
It means different things to different people. Like, for example, we're investing in this 18-unit portfolio, and I heard someone say, what's the benefit of investing in a fund? Like that's what they call the portfolio a fund. I wouldn't necessarily have called it a fund because it's one deal, but whatever. It's just, it's what exactly
No,
is.
I understand the concept. Tell me something. This leads me to a very, very good question, because you became an expert of vetting, meaning you knew vetting deals, but vetting sponsors as a fund is a whole different ballgame. It's easier because you don't have to, in one hand, deal with every deal, like find the deals, deal with them, acquire them, sign the loan, do things that are really hard, and then actually manage either the construction or manage the property, manage the asset, whatever level you're managing. It's not easy. However, on the level of a private equity, which you are, you have to really know how to vet the sponsor, vet the general partner, the person who's the honcho, the guy who rides the deal. It's a whole different expertise. You want to talk about that a little bit? How you find them, how you vet them, what's important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say the first thing is that it's not cut and dry. It takes time to build these relationships with sponsors. I'm very selective, and I want to have a relation. If I'm going to be bringing capital to a deal, I need to have a good relationship with the sponsor, and I need to feel like this is a sponsor that I can have some access to, and that I'm going to be able to perform my own due diligence. So, building trust it's not a straight line process. It kind of builds over time, and it's networking. It's asking questions. Of course, you have to be respectful of people's time. They're busy people, but one way to do that is I can put money into a deal to show that I'm committed to them. And then after that, I can, maybe ask for a little bit more of their time and then just see how they respond. Like some people are not necessarily willing to treat me like in the same way that they would treat a bank. So for example, with a bank, you have to give them you have to give them everything, right? Like for your lender, you have to give them your personal financial statements and all this other stuff, right? So not everybody's willing to give that to me. And that's something that I'm not really, I want to make sure that I can get the information that I need, because it's important to me to know who is backing this deal. And when, if there is push come to shove moment, does the sponsor have the ability to carry the deal? What does their financial statement look like? So just, that's like one example of something that, is important for me to know. And so not everyone's willing to do that. And so that's probably not a good fit for me to invest with them. So in any case, I am vetting a sponsor something also, it's a gut check. It's seeing how they respond to your questions. I've definitely had people who I felt like were rude to me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, I can never invest with you now that, that conversation just happened. So I'm like, that's just a closed door. Right. So
Yeah.
it's like, I'm bringing money to the table. I need to be able to ask these questions, So, yeah. And obviously, it's a give and take. Right. And so, but yeah, vetting a sponsor is something that I take, it's the most important part of the deal. You got to know also how conservative their underwriting is. So having a very close relationship with their underwriter and people who are preparing the analyses and making sure that I understand exactly how they arrived at pretty much every single assumption. Like, not just going through the T12 myself, but actually talk to them about, well, where did you get this number? Where did you get this number? So that I can understand and know their process of
Absolutely
deals. And then not everybody is going to take the time to do that for you. And a lot of people aren't going to take the time, for a sponsor. They don't necessarily want to have to do that for every $50,000 investor. So for me, I'm able to conduct that high level of due diligence so that people can rely on my work.
Something, this is so real and so interesting, because when you vet a sponsor, you just said, you know what, if there's a breaker, if we can't get along, if I asked you a question that got you offended and people say, okay, why? He sounds good. He sounds like a guy who has the track record and so on. The one thing that people don't understand, we're not talking about a sale. You're not buying a dress or a jeans or I don't know what. You're not buying a phone. This is, this is a long-term, this is marriage, because the second you invest with that person, you're going to be in touch for whether it's a 3-year process, whether it's a 3-year hold in the property, sometimes 5, 7, sometimes 10-year hold. So it means, and it's probably not the first you want to, reinvest with that person, because it's really hard to find other sponsors. And sometimes you fall on someone really good. You want to keep on investing with that person for at least few properties. Obviously you want to diversify eventually, but people don't understand. You need to build that relationship. And once something bad is happening in day one, what is going to happen when things, when it hits the fan and things are not going so well. And many times it does happen. So you want to really get along in the beginning. So that's a great tip. I like that. That's a great tip. Suja, anything else you want to share with us, on your strategies to tell the people of how you can help them in terms of investments before we say our goodbyes, which is, I think this was a great interview. So please do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was just really a wonderful conversation. Thanks so much. And I want to give listeners a way to listen to my show too, which is called Passive Income Unlocked. It's a podcast, and we've had Ishai as a guest and many, many more people. It's a daily podcast. Please tune in. You guys
can check out the links below.
Yes. My firm is called Luxe Capital Investment Group. And again, our goal is to offer our investors a diversified set of offerings across asset classes, geographies, and sponsors. And, we're very selective with who we work with. It does not happen, quickly. And because downside protection is a huge part of what we're focused on, and also looking at diversification amongst asset classes, right? So that is what
you
we
know what?
have.
Share with us a little bit, just very quickly, what type of asset class you guys
Oh yeah, sorry, I
are
haven't even
looking at.
mentioned that. So
Yes,
when
yes, this is important. This is important. Guys, listen. Go ahead.
when I say recession resistant asset classes, for me, what I'm talking about are multifamily does fall into that. Also self-storage, senior living. We're doing ATMs, mobile home parks, and industrial. And so those are the asset classes that I'm focused on.
Interesting.
And really, yeah, find them to be attractive from a downside protection standpoint.
This was beautiful. Suja, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And
Yeah.
you guys check out all the links. Check out Suja and our company. And you guys, if you want to learn about investments, you want to understand how to invest, how to become a really smart passive investor, Suja is really a great source for that. Suja, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Isha. Really great to see you. Have a great day.
No